So am I dissociating or am I accessing emptiness? Am I accessing awareness? It is a difficult question to answer, but I will do my best to try and answer it based on my own experience. So what is dissociating? First of all, the way I understand it, and I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, but from my own direct experience of doing it for 40 years, is that it's part of a nervous system reaction that happens automatically, often starting in childhood when there is a lot of trauma and danger and things happening, where you automatically learn to escape so that you don't feel the full impact of whatever trauma it is that is happening. So it's something that's wired into us to be able to do, so that it's a grace. It's so that we don't feel as bad or intensely as to what is happening, and it protects us. It protects our sanity. And so this is something that was wired into us at a young age. And if we had a lot of trauma there, we were doing it often. And we can get to a state where if there's enough hardship that has been experienced in the life, that we can be living in a pretty much permanent state of dissociation without even realizing it. And we're going to appear perhaps unemotional, maybe a bit cold or aloof. We're going to feel numb, perhaps. We're going to feel like we don't really have a lot of access to emotions, whether they be positive or negative, feel quite neutral, perhaps feel checked out or spaced out, or just not really participating in life or feeling really in the body. We could be looking at it from a different perspective almost, as if we're not really living the life. It can feel like an altered state. It's going to feel slightly different from person to person, but it's really, in a sense, us coming up and out and not being in the body anymore, whatever it is that we are, and experiencing it from a very experiencing life from a detached state. And that makes us feel everything less strongly that is happening in the body to protect us. Now, that's totally fine. And I'm so grateful that that mechanism is there within humanity so that we can survive and keep functioning in life. It is great for survival and for our sanity, certainly. But what happens with awakening is where things get a little bit complicated, because dissociation can mimic what awareness sounds like, what emptiness sounds like. And so then we can be curious when we're going through and having these awakening experiences. We may know that about ourselves, that we are dissociating. Perhaps we only dissociate when we tap into a trauma or when something bad happens and we realize we're leaving the body again, we're out of touch with feeling into the body, we're out of touch with our emotions. Or maybe we know that we're pretty much in a permanent state of dissociation, and that's something that we're working on in therapy. But we may be also going through an awakening and accessing our essential nature, and it has similar traits to being dissociated. So yes, it's confusing. It's a difficult question to answer, but my sense of it, my best guess is that if we are wired for dissociating a lot due to a hard life, an ongoing hard life, or lots of trauma as a child, then we can certainly start the awakening process and access our being, access our true nature, emptiness, in a dissociated way. And this is what I did for, I guess it was about the first 10 years of the awakening process that I had, is that I was doing spiritual practice and meditating and doing all the normal things. But in that, I was very much doing it in a dissociated way, because I was very disembodied just naturally without even realizing it. And I was able to access altered states. I was even working as a psychic medium. I was able to access mystical states. And I believe I was also accessing emptiness. I was accessing my essential nature during that time, but I was doing it in a transcendent way, what I call a transcendent way. So I was accessing it in a disembodied way, up and out here. And it actually came quite naturally to me, because I'd been doing that all my life, because I was highly traumatized and dissociating very naturally. And so I think people that are dissociating have a propensity and a natural ability, perhaps, to access their being more easily even than someone that's not dissociating, but it is in a dissociated way, in a transcendent way, which makes sense. So it's up and out here, accessing awareness and emptiness. So I don't think we can say because you dissociate, that means you're not accessing your being. I think some people that dissociate can access their being, but they're doing it in a transcendent way, not an embodied way, would be how I would answer that question. So can you be legitimately going through an awakening and be dissociating? Yes, you can. You can be in what I call the transcendent phase of awakening, where you are accessing your being through your spiritual practices or just automatically and spontaneously through that transcendent way that you have access to because you can dissociate in that way. It's like it gives you access to be able to access your being in that way, in a transcendent way. So people with certain mental illnesses, dissociative disorders, people with trauma can access their being and transcend either automatically or quite easily without much effort, and are quite good at the transcendent phase of awakening, often, I notice, because they're already sort of wired that way to be out and sort of escaping the body. So it almost gives you an advantage to the transcendent phase to have some type of issue like that where you're already dissociating. Where things get more complicated, where it becomes a disadvantage, is because there is another stage to awakening, which I call the embodiment phase, where after we've been transcending and exploring emptiness and exploring what that actually is like for ourselves and experiencing it, then it wants to come down and be embodied into the flesh, and for it to all wake up here in the flesh and to be integrated. Now, this is where people that have been dissociating and have been traumatized and have DID and all of those types of things that were good at the earlier stage may start to struggle and perhaps even stall out here. So many may stay in the transcendent phase where it is easier to stay like that and just go to that level of awakening and stay there for their life, which is understandable. But for awakening to become permanent, we need to embody it. That's the pathway there, is to come down and into the body for it to become permanent. There's no shortcut from the transcendent phase to permanent awakening. It has to go through the embodiment phase, which is a hard phase. Now, particularly if you've got reasons why you're dissociating, there's probably a good reason why embodiment doesn't feel good to you. So it might feel highly traumatizing and noisy and painful in the body. And all of that can be worked through doing things like getting particular types of therapy, like somatic experiencing, things that work on the body contractions and the noise in the body and the noise in the nervous system. So there's things that can be done, it can be healed, luckily. It's just that it can be quite a hard process. So some people will stall out and just stay in the transcendent phase. But if we want to keep progressing and embody this fully, then we need to find a way to start to embody it. And so with that, we'll go the dissociating. So even the capacity to do it. Initially, there's a transition phase that I notice with people where they will start to drop down into the body and start to taste that. So they may be mostly dissociated and they're starting to develop body awareness. They're starting to feel into the body. The body starts to come online, and you start to feel places that feel sort of numb, and they're almost like waking up and coming out of a freeze is how it feels. And you start to be able to feel more of your body. Actually notice that it's waking up and going through its own awakening process. So that will be going on as people start to drop down into their body. And they're probably going to notice it doesn't feel very nice in here. This is what I've been trying to escape from through dissociating, it's because it's highly traumatized. It's very painful. It's emotionally very painful, psychologically. And gradually over time, the desire or the capability to dissociate will get less and less, and adjustment will happen where embodiment will happen more, and it gets quieter in the body and more enjoyable to stay in the body until there's just a permanent resting into the body and dissociation stops happening. But there usually is a lot of transition and commotion as that takes place with someone that was dissociating prior. And so that's a great positive sign that there is progress happening. If you're starting to drop down into the body, and even if it is painful, you're noticing that it's starting to wake up and you're wanting to spend more attention on the body, and that dissociating, which once felt good, it once felt like an escape, it once felt like the only place you wanted to be, perhaps actually starts to feel a bit off, and you start to enjoy feeling embodied more. It feels more alive and more real, and you enjoy feeling your emotions, and you don't want to feel numb and checked out anymore. You actually want that, and so you start to lean towards it and try to do practices that will pull you more down into the body. That desire to escape actually starts to feel a bit off, and you truly want to let that go. And so that transition will happen where you will become gradually more and more embodied until you are just staying in the body and not dissociating anymore, and you won't even miss it. And then you'll be into what I call the embodiment phase of awakening, which is largely about the body. And although there may be the odd time where you're dissociating, so perhaps you tap in on some very difficult trauma and you might dissociate again. You have to go through a process of trying to process that and work through that without dissociating. Maybe need help from a trauma therapist to do that. It is highly likely if you're dissociating, you will need help from a specialist like a somatic experiencing practitioner, because it's probably means that you have a trauma there if you are dissociating. So you might need someone to help navigate that and navigate the nervous system responses that are happening to try to tap into that trauma. It might be too difficult for you to do it on your own. And so as we tap into trauma, or as we tap into our true nature and we see things that are scary, we're coming across the void, we're seeing existential aloneness and things like that, we might start dissociating again, because it's the natural response wired into your nervous system to do that when things get too overwhelming, to protect you. But unfortunately, we start to notice, well, that's hindering my awakening, it's hindering my healing progression. And so we may understand I need to stop doing that, but it can be quite automatic and difficult. And that's where we need a practitioner to help us to work through that. But it is helpful to know that the direction we're heading in with this is to stop dissociating. That's the goal if we want to keep progressing with awakening. So do I think someone could be permanently awake, like get to the very end and liberation, and still be dissociating? My best guess would be no. I don't think that would be possible. I think going through the embodiment phase is where you drop down endlessly. Even if you're still doing it initially, it gets to a point where you really stop dissociating, you stop transcending, you stop having big transcendent experiences, because you're really stuck in the body. You're living from the body. So as that goes along, that happens well before the permanent shift, which we could call liberation, enlightenment, where it becomes permanent. So I don't think it's someone that is at that stage would still be dissociating. That's my best guess. So if you're still dissociating permanently, you're likely in the transcendent phase of awakening. So yes, you can be going through an awakening and be dissociating. I do think the two things go hand in hand, particularly if we're talking about the transcendent phase of awakening. Could you be in the embodiment phase of awakening and be dissociating? You could be in the early stages of the embodiment phase if you're dissociating occasionally when you're hitting upon something that's very overwhelming. Yes, you could be in the early stages of the embodiment phase of awakening. This is just my opinion. Later stages of embodiment, very unlikely that you'd be dissociating at that stage. I can't really imagine it. Being awake, there's no dissociating going on. It's completely embodied. There's no escape. There's nowhere to go. It's permanently an embodied state. And how does dissociation feel different to accessing your essential nature, your empty nature? Some of the points to look out for is that your true nature feels good, usually. It's a positive feeling. It feels alive. It can feel very present in the body, not always, depending on whether we're accessing it in a transcendent or an embodied way. But it can feel very present and here in the body as one indicator. But it feels positive, alive. It's not a numbed out, dead kind of escaped feeling or a checked out feeling. It's very vibrant and a sense of existence. It's powerful. And so, yes, it's formless. And so it has emptiness as a word used to describe it, meaning just that it is empty of form, not that it is empty in a depressive way. So that word's not a great word to describe it, I don't think. It is just pointing to the fact that it has no form, but it is very much something, but not a thing, but very alive and vibrant. It's its own thing that's hard to describe, but very real to experience ourselves. So if it feels flat or depressive or checked out or numb, that's much more likely to be a dissociated state. And if it feels vibrant and alive and you feel fully online, so it's almost opposite in a way, you feel fully here and online, fully awake, fully vibrant, fully alive, then it is more likely to be accessing emptiness. Now, just because we're in a dissociated state doesn't mean that our true nature has gone anywhere. It can't go anywhere. It's just covered over by what it is that we're experiencing. So in a dissociative state, it's more, we are probably dissociating from awareness, from our true nature, checking out from that, as well as everything else that we're experiencing that is causing us challenges in the body. But it hasn't actually gone anywhere. We're just dissociated from it. It is what is aware of that dissociation. We could put it in those terms. So it doesn't actually go anywhere. It's just that we might be less likely to notice it if we're in a deeply troubled, dissociated state because something bad has happened. It might be quite hard to notice your true nature then. You're certainly welcome to try and look for it if you can. It might give you some peace. But it is interesting to try to notice a difference for yourself between a dissociated state that perhaps doesn't feel the best. It might give you a bit of a headache, make you feel a little bit dizzy. It might not be that enjoyable versus accessing something that is supernatural, really. It's mystical, it's beyond words, it's truly amazing. So I would say try to experiment for yourself and try to see if you can notice the difference between the two. But you can very much still be going through an awakening and accessing your essential nature in a transcendent way while you are having some issues with dissociation. And I just encourage you to get help from someone that can help you to come back into your body and start to find the safety in your body. Notice that this is where home is, this is where the safety is, that we don't need to dissociate anymore, that we're not in danger anymore, and find that safety in the body and help to guide you through that process, because it won't just help you to feel better and stop dissociating and start to connect with your emotions and your body and have a more enjoyable life, but it will also help you to get to the permanent awakening.